Catherine Miles visits her parents in the Amazon during her summer vacation. While having a picnic on her father's new boat, they soon face horrors they could never have imagined. Catherine is accused of the deaths of her uncle and aunt and declares herself innocent. The judge asks her how she came to be in the Amazon as a student. She explains that her parents owned a 6,000-hectare rubber plantation in Rio Fuentes, and it was normal for her to visit them every summer. She also saw the area as a paradise. When the judge asks her about her knowledge of the headhunter tribes, she admits it, but emphasizes that they were not dangerous to her. Later, while celebrating her birthday, she returned to Rio Fuentes with her parents, aunt, and uncle. Her parents gave her a gold crucifix with rubies as a gift. Her aunt, Maria de Vega, apologized to Catherine for not having a gift, as they were poor, which prompted a significant look from Mr. Miles. Maria's husband, Jose de Vega, greeted Catherine sweetly and kissed her hand. Later, her relatives suggested having a picnic the next day using her father's new houseboat, and so they did. However, as they were heading to the dock, Jose told Mrs. Miles that it would be better to take another boat since he had to attend to some matters, and the lady gave them the speedboat. A helicopter arrived, and Mr. Miles explained that it was the Postal Service, which also helped them patrol the area. The pilot greeted him enthusiastically and congratulated Catherine on her birthday before leaving. As the journey began, everything seemed perfect, and Catherine thanked her parents for the beautiful gift. Then, her father shared an important lesson, telling her to enjoy life to the fullest and never give up, no matter the circumstances. Mrs. Miles noticed that Maria and Jose were catching up to them in the speedboat with the workers. She commented that they had always brought servants since they started working for them. She expressed her displeasure at bringing servants to a family picnic and asked her husband to remind them, but the man ignored the behavior. The wife pointed out that Jose had always been bad at what he did, but the husband argued that this was precisely why he worked for them now and that he was improving in the management of the plantation. Therefore, Mrs. Miles joked that they could retire and return to London if that were the case, but her sister wouldn't like taking over. Mr. Miles argued that the couple was working hard because they liked the plantation, and anyone would think it was a tempting offer. He decided to talk to them later, but Catherine chimed in, saying that the Amazon was fantastic and that she would rather stay than go to England with her aunt and uncle. Her mother promised to return with her instead, and in her happiness, Catherine shouted the news to her relatives. At that moment, the prosecutor asks Catherine if they had done anything that might have angered the natives, but she claims they hadn't. She recounts that when her father stopped the boat in a good spot for a picnic, they were suddenly attacked with blowguns, killing her parents immediately, while she was shot in the arm. The judge asks her why she didn't escape, and she explains that it was curare, a native poison that paralyzes the victim before taking full effect. Therefore, she could only listen to what was happening before losing consciousness. She regained consciousness when a group of headhunters from the Guaynara tribe arrived at the boat. A man named Amukai extracted the poison from her arm, but even so, her mobility was still limited. Another man took her father's hunting knife and her parents' heads as trophies. They tied her to a bamboo pole and took her back to their village as a servant. During the journey, the same man who took her father's knife also took her necklace, which led Amukai to scold him and send him away. Later, they were attacked by the Tamuli, an enemy tribe of cannibals, but Amukai defeated their leader and took his head as a trophy. A week after their disappearance, the Postal Service scoured the area to search for the plantation owners. They spotted the boats and the lifeless bodies of the couple, so they immediately notified the police. They soon arrived and recovered the bodies. Meanwhile, the effects of the poison had already worn off. Catherine walked with the Guaynaras until they finally reached the village, where she saw a circular cabin called Shapin where everyone lived. Many natives approached to touch her, intrigued, but Amukai shooed them away and introduced her to Chief Ramwani. The chief touched her and found her smell unpleasant, so he ordered the women to clean her. Then he saw Mr. Miles' blade and took it from Amukai, but the warrior kept it. Although he was a poor member of the tribe, he was the strongest warrior, so the chief respected his strength. After washing her and oiling her with the oil they used, they took Catherine to the center of the Shapin to present her to everyone. Embarrassed to be in front of everyone, she crouched to protect herself, but the tribesmen ordered her to stand up straight, and Amukai pushed him away. Fame Terry, the richest man in the tribe, offered a water dog, a goose, and a turtle to the chief to claim her. Upon seeing this, Amukai offered a spear, the knife, the necklace, and himself to Fame Terry to claim her, as he had nothing else to offer, but the rich man refused him. Catherine was immediately taken to the rich man's chambers. He ordered his other wives to hold her down while he took her, but he stopped when he discovered that she was still pure, as the women of his tribe lost their purity early. Suddenly, the prosecutor interrupts her to stop speaking, deeming it irrelevant, but her lawyer insists that it is essential to establish her defense, so the judge allows her to continue. She recalls wanting to end her life but remembered her father's words to keep living no matter what. She narrates that the Guaineras treated her like a child and sometimes left her alone. Although she tried to escape, there was nowhere to go, and she was always faced with the reality of how weak she was compared to the wild animals that could attack her. On top of that, the warriors always chased her as part of a game they had created. Once she returned to the village, the women performed a ritual to take away her purity. The tribe celebrated afterward, as it was a religious ritual for them. She was taken to Famateri's hut and tried to escape, but was caught, beaten, and incapacitated. The tribe member Garagli tried to help her but was pushed aside. Fortunately, Umukai challenged Fameteri to a duel to claim possession of Catherine, and the young warrior won by taking the other man's life. In Umukai's cabin, Luamari, his sister, surprisingly spoke a little English to explain to Catherine that she was now her brother's woman. The prosecutor doubts her testimony, so Catherine explains that Luamari was raised in an American mission until she was 7 years old and therefore still remembers how to use the language, even if only a little. That night, Fameteri was cremated while the villagers sang. Although she always wanted to escape, there was no opportunity. The prosecutor asks if she served Umukai as his woman, but her lawyer and the judge allow her to refuse to answer. However, she states that the man respected her and patiently taught her his customs. Nevertheless, every time she saw her father's sword and his necklace, she was reminded of her parents' fate, which kept her hostile towards him. Weeks passed, and she found solace in her makeshift flute while earning her place as a regular villager and Umukai's wife. She did her best to adapt to their culture. Even so, every time she passed by the hut where they kept their trophies and saw her parents' heads displayed, she felt hatred towards their triumph. Catherine continued learning about the tribe, especially during the women's period when they were separated from the rest and lived in the trees. She planned an escape but had to be cautious, as she learned that if a woman betrayed her man in any way, the punishment was severe. One night, during her isolation, she fled and took her parents' heads to bury them. Garageli and Umukai witnessed her actions but kept it a secret, though the disabled man was beaten for not guarding the trophies properly. Feeling guilty, she used her knowledge to align Garageli's bones while he recovered. However, the times of peace ended when Udari, a married woman, was caught in an affair with another man. As punishment, the man was tied face down, and his face was covered with honey to attract insects until his life ended. Udari, on the other hand, was bathed before being offered to the river god. As she boarded the boat, resigned to her fate, Catherine begged the woman to at least give her a paddle to have a chance of survival, but they remained firm in their beliefs. All Catherine could do was call out to Udari as the boat was swallowed by the raging waters. This worsened Catherine's depression and hostility toward Umukai, as she witnessed how her life could end if she betrayed him. However, she also realized that Umukai might be her only key to escaping that place. After some time, Garageli recovered, and with Catherine's treatment, he managed to walk again. This action was recognized by the villagers and the chief, as they believed she had magic, so they celebrated the miraculous event. Then, Umukai began to act more kindly toward her, but she still rejected him, despite Lamari's explanation that her brother truly loved her. After some time, Catherine worked like all the other women. She wove, gathered fruits, prepared food, and often went fishing using a poison harmless to humans. She narrates how wild the jungle could be but also points out that nature was wonderful and that good things happened, like when Lamari shared the news of her pregnancy. However, the prosecutor notes that despite her claims of innocence and the hardships in the jungle, she remains guilty of taking 2 lives. The defense attorney argues that these memories are essential to establishing that her experience led her to do what she did. Catherine remembered how Umukai did everything he could to show his sincerity towards her by learning English from Lamari. Even so, she expressed how much she hated the man for taking the lives of her parents, although Lamari clarified that it wasn't her brother who did it, but the other man from the city. In fact, Umukai was a witness during the attack. They were interrupted when a helicopter arrived, so Catherine ran to ask for help. However, one of the men shouted at the natives, taking the lives of some of the villagers. Although Catherine's group ran towards the trees to hide, the bounty hunters launched explosives to flush them out. They had no choice but to come out, and unfortunately, the helicopter chased Lamari and the child she was trying to save. The hunter shot them, ending their lives. Then, they got off the helicopter and took Lamari's head as a trophy. Meanwhile, Umukai and Catherine could only hide behind the bushes as they witnessed the horrific scene. This triggered Catherine's trauma, and she blamed Umukai for her parents' deaths. Umukai explained that the men from the city were the ones who took her parents' lives, but Catherine refused to listen, so the warrior slapped her to snap her out of it. He then narrated the events of that day. He saw that after the men used blowguns on the people in the floating house, they got on the speedboat with a couple. The couple then conspired to take Catherine's parents' lives, throwing their lifeless bodies into the river before leaving. Catherine believed Umukai's story but remained puzzled about the identity of the unknown couple. Finally, her hostility towards Umukai faded, and she told him she had to go home, but the man warned her it was dangerous. Still, she decided to leave but was attacked by a snake. Fortunately, Umukai saved her, but he was bitten instead, and moments later, he collapsed due to the venom. Catherine attended to him, marking the beginning of their mutual love. One day, Umukai returned with a boat he had won by challenging the Karawari tribe. After the warrior threw away his knife to renounce his nature as a headhunter, Catherine realized Umukai's complete dedication to her. Because of this, she gave herself completely to him. Despite this, her desire to find out who was responsible for her parents' death remained, and she wanted revenge. So she convinced Umukai to escort her home, and he eventually agreed. This was the only way for her to recover from the horror she had experienced. Once they arrived at the dock, Catherine noticed that the signs had changed when the Devagas took over the plantation, concluding that her uncle and aunt had planned the attack to take the plantation. She returned to the mansion with a bow and arrow, filled with rage. She also took an axe she found along the way. Soon, she discovered her aunt and uncle sleeping in her parents' room. The Devagas were shocked to see her. Maria denied her return, believing she had left. While the women conversed, Joseph stealthily opened the drawer in search of a weapon, but Catherine shot him with a poisoned arrow, terrifying Maria. Catherine asked who had planned the misdeeds, and her aunt blamed her husband. Still, the heiress refused to believe her, as she knew they both conspired to do it, as evidenced by the fact that they were reveling in the wealth of her deceased parents. Catherine wounded Maria with a poisoned arrow, paralyzing her. Then, she decapitated them in revenge. When she returned to Umukai, she confessed to what she had done, despite knowing she would be condemned for her actions, as it was a taboo for Ganara women to shed blood. Torn between divine tribal law and his love for Catherine, he allowed the woman to board the boat and row away with her. However, seeing the man's desperation, Catherine jumped and swam back to the city to turn herself into the police, which led to her current trial. Her defense attorney asked the jury and judge to consider the mitigating circumstances that led her to brutally end the lives of her relatives. He argued that it was a case of temporary insanity. However, the prosecutor argued that it was a deliberate act, presenting the video of how the authorities found the deceased couple in their bed. Her attorney used this video as evidence that only a disturbed person could commit such acts, especially given Catherine's age and circumstances. Therefore, she was sentenced to 8 years of confinement in a mental institution. The video presented in court and the brief clip of Catherine in the asylum, captured by a local photographer, are evidence of her experiences. Years later, Catherine is married to a British architect and never talks about her traumatic experiences, except with a reporter she allowed to do a story about her history. Some people claim that she sometimes seems distant, as if her mind is elsewhere. Still, Catherine believes she is happy with her current life, especially with her child. However, fragments of her past with Umukai remain, particularly when he decided to take his own life, as his beliefs did not allow him to live any longer with Catherine. These are memories she will carry with her for the rest of her life. If you enjoyed the summary, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. It's free and really helps me keep growing.